So welcome, vítáme vás, kuchaři, chefs. We are so delighted. Like I said before, in case you missed it, this is our 5th virtual cooking class. I cannot believe it. We are back by popular demand. Thank you for joining us from all over the US to learn to cook a traditional and delicious 3-course Czech meal. My name is Linda Jaňourová. I'll be today's moderator. I'm also the president of Sokol San Francisco. I am delighted to introduce you to 3 other Sokol San Francisco members who happen to be incredible chefs. And those will be serving as our instructors today. Raise your hands and wave when I say your name. Milena Harvey.
Hello. Ahoy.
She's going to be making our polévka s játrovými knedlíčky, which is the soup with the liver dumplings. Denisa, wave. Thank you. She's going to be making svíčková, you can't translate that, with dumplings. And finally, Simona, if you could wave.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us.
Simona will be making our strudel, and I never do this, but I want to say thank you to Jana as well. She's the Sokol SF little square. She is our tech guru. You would not believe how much tech is involved. Thank you, Jana. Just a few housekeeping notes. The session is being recorded, and that is so that you can access this video later should you need to. The chats, we usually do try to work on those, edit them a little bit and send them out because people ask questions and it's easy to and nice to go back to see the questions and answers. Because this session is being recorded, we ask that you please stay muted so that you don't inadvertently show up on video. But if you have questions, by all means, speak up in the chat. We'll get through them throughout the session, and at the end, we'll have a dedicated Q&A portion as well. If you have any issues with video, audio, let us know right away, and we'll try to fix those. And finally, you should have received recipes for today's dishes already, but if you haven't, you'll receive them again after this recording. We do a little recap and send everything out. So. Without further ado, Denisa, please take it away.
Hi there. My name is Denisa Pedersen. I live in Lafayette. I'm a mom of 3 grown sons, and I grew up in the Czech Republic. And svíčková is one of our favorite meals, and that's for those families in the Czech Republic and for our family here. I don't make it very often, but I make it as often as I can when our sons come to visit, and it's just our favorite. Svíčková na smetane is a beef sirloin in cream sauce, and it is beef baked with root vegetables, onions, celery, carrots, and herbs. We have bay leaf, we have thyme, we have allspice, salt and pepper. And the combination, which is sort of sweet and tart and meaty and creamy, it's just a really nice combination that comes together. It's a relatively simple dish. It's not very difficult, but it's time consuming. The baking takes at least 3 hours. And what I usually do is the night before I get it ready, and then the morning off or in the afternoon before we want to eat, I just bake it for those 3 hours, and then I finish up with the cream sauce. So let's get started. As I mentioned, we are going to use beef tenderloin or sirloin. This particular piece of meat is beef round eye roast. This is about 1.5 pounds. Reading a little bit about the history of svíčková, my understanding is that it's called svíčková because the meat has a little bit of a shape of a candle. I'll go with that. What I do first is I salt it, pepper it, and then I braise it, sear it in a hot oil. I use olive oil, and I also use a little bit of bacon grease. I just can't pass that. It just smells so great. I don't use much of it. I don't use it often, but it helps the flavor. Once I sear it, I put the meat in a container that I'm going to be baking it in, and then I continue browning the onions and then browning the vegetables and then putting that all in one container and baking it. So that's what we're going to do right now. So I'm going to salt the meat from both sides. And as I said, this is about 1.5 pounds. I will pepper it. And in the meantime, I'm going to turn this on so that it's nice and hot. Add a little bit of olive oil. Then I will get my pot ready. This is the lid. Those of you who are familiar with Czech cooking, this came from Nový Bydžov, where my family is from, and it's very special to me. All right, so I will pepper it from both sides. And
That is so, you don't rinse the meat, is that right?
oh no, I don't. I try to touch it just the very least possible. If you notice, I don't even put it on a wooden cutting board. I try to handle it the least amount of possible. And no, I don't wash it. Sometimes the meat comes with marbled fat, which you can leave in. There is a recipe where you actually can put bacon pieces inside, and that is called larded braised beef. I don't do that just because I think it's not necessary. I'm sure it would just enhance the flavor. I've also seen a few families that would use carrots and put carrots inside. And just keep in mind that this recipe, I think, is different based on each family. And just I'm used to putting quite a bit of vegetables. Some families don't. So now this is a little nice and hot. So we can put the meat in. Hear it sizzle. You want to sear it quickly.
And as you're doing that, Deniso, can you tell us how many people this will serve?
It depends whether you have boys or girls and how large your family is. This will definitely serve a family of 4. I make quite a bit of sauce, and so I'm gonna turn it so that it browns on the other side as well. I think the favorite part and the most popular in the Czech Republic is the sauce, so not necessarily the meat. So if you hear people say svíčková, it's the meat, but it's also the sauce, the creamy sauce. And I would make quite a bit of it. I'll show you the container that I make, which is probably larger than this. And that's primarily the sauce. So people will have the meat, but it's the sauce. So you can feed more for those who will not want too much meat, and they will want dumplings with the sauce. And I'm searing it on both sides. Now, as I mentioned, we already put salt and pepper. What you want to add to the meat once it's in the container, this is allspice in little balls. I usually put them in as is because I wanted to spread throughout the whole container. What you could also do is put it in a small container, for example, with a tea bag, and put the tea bag in. I don't do that, but what you do have to do is at the end, you have to fish for it and pull those out. You don't want people to be eating it. Another very key ingredient is the bay leaf, and you want to put about, well, maybe 3 large bay leaves. These are small. You want them large enough so, again, you can pull those out when the sauce is done. And then another key ingredient is thyme, and I'm quite generous with it. It smells beautifully, French herb, beautiful. All right, so now we're gonna, so it's nicely seared. So what you're gonna do is put that in your ready container. And in the meantime, you will add the cut up onions. I have 2 large onions. I'm quite generous with onions. You can't go wrong with that. It gives it a really nice sweet flavor. And we're gonna put that right in here. I also add a little bit of sugar to the onion because it helps to glaze it. It caramelizes a little bit and it gives it a good flavor. Not too much. The onions are sweet enough already. We're gonna brown those a little bit. While this is browning, now we're gonna put our leeks and our thyme, and we're gonna season our meat quite generously. Put the leeks on. And you're gonna put your allspice.
And it looks like you're a little far away from the camera, which is fine, but it looks like you're putting it literally on top of the meat, right? Not around it, it's just going.
Yep. I'm putting it literally on top of the meat, and then I'm gonna put the vegetables right around it. Around this. All right. I think I would, in real life, I would brown it a little longer, but this is perfectly fine for now. And then you just put it around the meat. And I do the same thing with our root vegetables. As I said, what I have cut up is carrots, celery root, which is quite difficult to find in the United States, and not all stores carry it. And to substitute for the flavor, or to add to the flavor, I added regular celery stalk. And again, I'm quite generous with the vegetables because we love the sauce, the celery root. It's just fantastic. We're gonna brown it. And when that's browned, we're gonna add it around the meat again. And we're gonna add about a cup of, or maybe half a cup of the broth. What you do during the baking, which takes about 3.5 hours, you have to add the water or the broth or throughout the baking. I usually turn this about 3 times, and I add some of the broth.
How much broth should be there at any given point? As it's evaporating, you keep adding, and you want to have a layer of how much of broth?
I would say about maybe half of the container. You don't want it swimming in any liquid or broth, but you want it nice. The vegetables you want to be submerged and baked nicely.
And Dennis, so another question came up. Can you add parsnip, or would that not work?
I think you can, and I did see recipes with parsnip. I'm not a big fan of parsnip. Somehow it just has a different flavor, but it's also a root vegetable. It's the same family as celery. I don't think it would hurt it. All right, I turn this off. And again, in real life, I think I would give it a little longer than that, but we'll just cover it all. So you see, it really is very vegetable rich. Now I'm gonna cover it with broth. And you can have this be real broth that you make yourself. You can have that with little cubes. And this is what this looks like when you're putting it in the oven. I have the oven at 380 right now. You can go 375. I like to keep it going at higher temperature. And I'm just going to stick it in, and 3 hours later, you're going to be ready to eat. Now, in the meantime, you check on it. I would check on it every half an hour, make sure there's enough liquid, make sure you turn the meat so it doesn't brown too much from one side. And we'll revisit when we are ready to pull it out.
That sounds perfect. And before we go to Milena, can I ask one more question? Someone's asking if you can add the broth before you put the meat in, after. I mean, does it matter sort of the sequence of the broth?
I think I put the broth last just for technical reasons, because if I put the broth first and then I put the vegetables in, it would start splattering too much. So I like to put the seasoning in first, then the vegetables, sort of arrange it nicely so that it's right next to the meat, and then I put the broth around it.
Perfect. Thank you, Dennis. So may we go on to Milena at this point?
So I'm ready.
Perfect. Thanks a lot. Take it away.
Okay, I'm ready to show you how I make my polévka s játrovými knedlíčky. I'm going to start with the broth, but you can do it as Denisa already said. You can use store-bought broth, or when you make your broth from chicken bones. Like what I usually do is I buy chicken when it's on sale. I debone it, and save the bones for my broth. And that's what I did here. These are actually bones from chicken thighs. And it's a little less than a pound. In my recipe, I say a pound, but it's not necessarily, broth is not a science. It's kind of a little bit of this, a little bit of that. So we're gonna start with a little bit of the chicken bones. We're gonna put them in the pot. The next thing we're gonna put in is about a quarter of an onion, some celery stalks, some garlic cloves. Some people mash them, I use them whole. It just depends how much garlic do you really like. Then some allspice, and I'm using the whole balls. For this amount, I'm using about 3. I have 5 balls of black pepper, and of course bay leaf. Bay leaf gives it a really nice flavor. I will use parsley for garnish. So I snipped off the stems of the parsley and I will add them too. Then we're gonna add some salt, and the stock is ready to go on the stove. And you wanna do, when you make broth or stock, you wanna have it on a low for a very long time. I already had water in my pot, so I'm gonna add a little bit more, because you just want the vegetables and the meat and the bones just barely covered, and it's gonna cook long and slow, so all the goodness from the bones and from the meat will go into the broth. And you know, the usual rule is that you want to pour cold water on it, because that extends the time of the meat and the vegetables leaching all the minerals and all the flavor into the broth. When your main reason is to use the meat, then you would want to drop the meat into a hot water, because then it would kind of seal the outside and you would have better meat and weaker broth. If you want a stronger broth and like you're making a good sauce, so then you would want that sauce to have the bigger flavor, and you would set it in the cold broth. I hope that I didn't complicate it too much. So now it's gonna go on the stove, and I'm gonna let it cook for about an hour. The longer it cooks, the better. For today's purposes, hour will be fine. So I will get back to you with how to make the knedlíčky a little later, and I will send it over to Simona.
Thank you so much, Milenka. My name is Simona, and I'm very happy. This is my first time when I got the opportunity to cook for you my favorite apple strudel. What I will do, let me introduce the ingredients. I will using beautiful, nice and sweet small apple, organic apple. They are nice and sweet. I already peel them and grind them. I will use little sugar. It's about 1/4 cup of the brown sugar and about 1/4 cup of raisins. You can also moisturize raisins, keep them overnight in the milk, or if you like, my grandmother usually keep them in the room to give them good kick. Then I will put little cinnamon and little nut. It's also, if some people have allergy, you can skip that. I just a little cut them for chunky. If I need to, I just put them and make them maybe a little smaller. But if it's too small, it's hard to taste in a strudel. And strudel is actually very traditional food in Bohemia and Moravia, and it's dating to the 18th century, to the Habsburg Empire, where Bohemia, Slovakia, Poland, Croatia, they do enjoy strudel. At the time, actually, the strudel was not with sugar, and there was only ingredients as flour, water, and oil and salt. And mostly they're using vegetable inside the strudel. And later they add the ingredients. I put all those ingredients in my apple. Oh my goodness, you can smell the cinnamon, and I can smell the vanilla. And also, if you want, you can using vanilla for taste. You can using something like trace, like or something just for little extra kick. If you want to have nice and smelly, very aromatic strudel, and then gently mix. The apple actually are the key for the good and tasty strudel. In the spring and before the summer, when my grandmother collect those apples from the garden, sometimes the apples were not properly red and they're like a little bit sour. Then it's important to add to them more sugar. And if they are nice, sweet in the winter time, then we can skip the lemon. We don't need to add the lemon. And after we mix everything nicely, we can see and see if there is some kind of excess liquid or water. Sometimes the apples are very, very full of water, depend the size of the apple, and that I'm using little strength to strain the apple before I'm even mix them to access water to get rid of the strudel.
Simona, I'm so sorry to interrupt, and I just want to let you know, and it's the same on my end. Someone's saying your sound is weak and it's going in and out a little bit.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Let's try if you can speak a little bit louder. Let's see if that takes care of it, and if not, we can troubleshoot. But if you wouldn't mind.
Thank you. I have used the ingredients: 4 apple, 1/4 cup of the sugar, 1/4 cup of raisins. I have used vanilla, cinnamon, and little lemon juice. I'm using like 1 teaspoon because my apples are very sweet. Through the winter, I'm using lemon, but in the spring, I do not put too much lemon juice because it's from the lemon because it's more soury. And how I said, the apple, the history go up to the 18th century, where actually in the Habsburg Empire, people like to cook the apple strudel. But at the time, that was mostly the recipe with gluten, like high flour gluten, water, oil, and salt. It was not sugar, was not raisin, and that was added later. And later also, people start looking up to the quality of the apples and sweetness of the apples, and they starting added sugar and different ingredients to make it nice and sweet pastry. And then from the Habsburg Empire, there was Bohemia, Slovakia, Slovenia, Croatia, Poland, and then the alternation starting on the strudel, people change different ingredients which they fill inside. While the oldest strudel recipe is dating to 1696, and it's a handwritten cookbook which is kept in the Vienna town library. And now what I'm doing, I will actually using the puff pastry. Puff pastry sometimes could be challenging to find. I like puff pastry from Trader Joe's, and the reason because they are too nice to roll, they have good moisture, and it's easy to roll and use. And sometimes the puff pastry is very hard to roll. That means we need to keep the pastry in a room temperature and let it nice sit. Then we got beautiful.
Simona, I'm going to interrupt one more time. We're going to work on, we think it's Wi-Fi. We'll work on it when we go to our next chef, the sound situation. Simona, could you move the bowl that's in front of you for us so that we can see the puffed pastry better?
Yeah.
Just the bowl. Yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you. And there's a question that's come in. Are the apples cut up? Are they grated? How do you process?
I actually peel the apple. I peel the skin completely. I peel it off, and then I have grating, using the grater, and it's I have just using this kind of simple grater, and I have grated the apple. And then I have added the rest of the ingredients. If the apple have too much moisture, I need to use the seed and take little the moisture away, because the strudel will puff in the oven and will not be friendly with me. And then I need to check on my pastry, which is in a room temperature. I'm using 1 teaspoon of flour, which I put on my desk here, on my working desk, and I use a little roller to nicely rolling. And this pastry is sized like for 6 people. It's actually nice and very fast dessert, and it's very less time consuming as other. And you can see I got nice shape of the pastry, and I keeping the little flour. Sometimes the pastry, if it's too warm, can get stiff. I mean, always I keeping on some just 1 teaspoon of the flour and making sure that my pastry is nice and do not stick. And then I using just small roller to gently prepare. After this is done, I using my fillings and I putting on my sheet to making sure that I do not put excessive water. That is it, like just little. I do not want the water there, because if I will have the water there, my strudel will be not in a good shape and can broke, or the apple can leak on the.
And Simona, do you use like 1 sheet of the puff pastry? How many, sort of, what's the, you know?
Because like 1 pastry is like for 6 people, but if it's party like ladies from church show up, I using 2 or 3, it depends, because 6 people, it's a very good like number for 1 sheet. If you have more people coming, then it's probably times each pastry is times 6. I mean, you can do 1, 2, 3, or 4 on 1 plate, or actually plating. I will show you that. And then gently, I put the right everything on it. If people like it, sometimes people just gently add it more cinnamon, or they using vanilla sugar and add it on it. And now the part is important, where I will rolling the strudel. I'm making sure that I like to turn about 1 inch on each side the pastry, because I want to making sure that the apple do not leave my dough and do not spread somewhere else. And then I gently rolling gently the dough about like 3/4, and then I take the other side and put and make this kind of nice roll. Now, when the roll is done, to protect that will explode in the oven, I taking this parchment. It's unbleached parchment paper. It's recyclable, compostable, less chemical, environmentally friendly. It's even healthy. And then I will slowly roll the parchment paper and roll like that. I want to have the and then I can fix the mean. Looks something like that. Can you see that?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. And now the important magic is take the room temperature egg and I divide it. I need the white part. And I just add little water, very little. And I'm mixing just like foam. And some new recipe ladies added nuts on the strudel, but in the old days they just put little the egg yolk, which is room temperature nicely, and close the side, which helped me to seal the strudel. And it's also like nice brownish and shiny. And I was learning from my grandma, it's good to turn the strudel down where I'm sealing that is not opening. The meat on the end like that will go to the oven. And the oven is already preheated 350. I will put it in.
Thank you, Simona. As you do that, but before we go on, couple of questions. Did you say to use egg yolk or egg white for this egg wash that you did?
I'm using the egg white because the egg yolk will burn the strudel. Milk will be very dark and can burn on the sides or like that. And the white part is like glue, will help seal if the pastry goes slowly opening somewhere to protecting the expand the inside, the filling outside.
Great, thank you. Can you remind us of the temperature that you just put it in?
I preheat the oven 350 for 10 minutes, very starting, and I just put it in.
Thank you. And last thing, still talking about the puff pastry. So when you take it out of the package, do you separate sort of the one sheet? You're using one layer of the puff pastry sheet. Can you walk us back through that?
Yes. There are different kind of puff sheet. The one which you can get from Trader Joe's, I like better, but it's a season item. Unfortunately, it's not certain months available. There are two puff sheets which they are in a roll, and you can use one in a time. This puff sheet I got from Novi here. It's actually fold like square, and it's looks like that inside the paper, and have it's a little bit like divided with this kind of small papers to making sure the moisture is not stick the pastry together. And it's important to keep outside like 30 minutes. If it's keep in the room temperature longer, and especially in the summer, the pastry becomes sticky and is hard to work with. So we need to go back to the wet freezer for another 10-15 minutes to making sure that it's between like not solid, but not very soft, something between, that it's nice working on the dough. And it's very fast. And the important things is the apple, if there is too much filling, it's better temperature 350 and starting 10, 15, 20 minutes and pick on your strudel. If there is a direction for 400, what happened? Outside the strudel became brownish and cooked, but inside the apple and the other fillings became raw. That is the little hack in that one. Yeah.
I've had that happen. Yes, I know. Thank you very much, Simona. We are moving on to Denisa for her knedlíky.
I have to unmute myself. So our svíčková is in the oven safely, and we're going to start our knedlíky. Now, you can make knedlíky several different ways. The two that are most popular and common is one with yeast and one with baking powder. The one that I'm going to be using today is the baking powder. I use the Der Oetker baking powder from Germany. I've had the best experience with it, so that's what I'm using. The recipe I'm using is 2 cups of flour. This is not your regular flour. This is either Wondra, which is an equivalent of polohrubá mouka. You need the grain not to be as fine as the regular flour that you typically buy in a supermarket. So I have 1 cup in here already. I will add another cup, and we're gonna do a half. And as you notice, I already have a little bit of flour on my cutting board as we're going to be rolling it out. So far I have 2.5 cups of flour. I will add a little bit of salt. I would say maybe half a teaspoon, just a pinch. Then I'm going to add the baking powder. I usually use the whole packet, and it's just about right for this 2.5. I would say 2.5 to 3 cups of flour is perfect. And I mix it together, and then I make a little bit of a indentation in my flour, and that's where I'm gonna break my eggs. use 2 eggs. And I have 1 cup of milk. I usually start out with adding just a little bit to get started. And I mix that, breaking the eggs. Can you see it?
Yes, we can, Denisa. Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. And it really, you need to mix it, and you can use your KitchenAid with a dough hook. My grandma always made it by hand, and that's sort of what I know. So I use, and it depends also in what quantity you're making it. If it is a larger batch, then I would recommend KitchenAid to help you out a little bit. For this amount, which we have the 2.5 cups, I think we can do it easily by hand. What you want to, the consistency you're looking for is dough that is a little bit on a sticky side. That's why I have flour ready over here. You mix it, and at least what my grandma always told me is that you have to mix it such that you mix up and down, and you create bubbles inside. Now, the baking powder is going to do its work as well, but you still want to mix it such that you have the bubbles. So you sort of scrape it from the bottom, and you go up and you start creating these bubbles. I don't know if you can see it or not, but they're starting to form already. And I would recommend that you add the milk a little bit at a time. And the reason is that you don't want the dough to be too liquidy. And I know that these are the measurements. I think I'm known for not following them all the time. But once you pour all of it in, then it becomes too messy and too difficult to incorporate. So I would just do a little bit at a time. And again, you're scraping it, and this is the motion where you are putting the air from underneath it inside the dumplings.
That is so. I feel like I'm watching the Olympic Games when you watch these world-class athletes, and it just looks so easy. You know, you're a pro. You're a pro.
No, I don't make them often enough, but this is about the consistency that you have. Just like that, as I said, a little bit sticky. You do want them to be, I don't want to say liquidy, but you want to have enough milk that will allow to add some of the breadcrumbs. So these are breadcrumbs, French bread cut up the day before. And you add, I would say, 1/2 cup maybe. Depends on the family. Some families make it with no breadcrumbs. Some families also add a little bit of cut up parsley for flavor and some more texture or color. So this is about the right stickiness. And I think I'm gonna mix it for a little longer. I already have one that I had prepared earlier, and I'm gonna use that to pour onto my floured surface. Now, the question always is, how long do you bake it, and how large do you cook it, and how large is the dumpling? It just depends. I use, for this 2.5 cups of flour, I would probably split it in 2 dumplings, and they're gonna grow to a larger size. So here I would just form, it's like a loaf. You think the German dumplings are balls. I think American dumplings are balls too, but Czechs make these little loaves, which then boil as one, and then you slice them into nice little dumplings. So on a floured surface, I would roll out 1/2 of the dough, and this is about the size that I would put in the boiling and salted water that I have ready right here. And that's what I'm gonna do right now. Put that in. Now, the tricky part is you have to follow up with that dumpling in the hot water, and you want to be sure that it doesn't stick to the bottom of the pot. You want it to be floating. So I would go and I would revisit, make sure it's floating, and then I can float it up and make sure it's boiling. Once it starts boiling, you want to turn it down and then have it simmer for about 7 minutes. If you cook it too long, then the outside becomes a little bit too sort of just sleazy and not very pleasant. And if you undercook it, then the dough inside is not cooked. So it's a fine line between cooking it. What you have to do about 7 minutes, turn the dumpling around, cook it for another 7 minutes, and that's when we're going to take it out. So I put it in now, and it's 11:43.
Perfect, Dennis.
So back to you.
Thank you. And you don't have to wait for the dough to rise at all, correct?
No, now if you have yeast dumplings, which Milena is an absolute expert in that, and she makes excellent dumplings with yeast, I think you do have to wait. I would go to Milena for this, but this one you don't know.
Great, thank you. Játroví knedlíčky, take it away.
Yeah. To the previous question, actually if you use yeast, then yes, it needs to rise. When you use the baking powder, you don't really want to wait too long because the chemical action would stop. You know, they would use all whatever it's happening and then they would get flat. So they actually need to go into the boiling water fairly soon. You don't want to let them sit for too long. So now onto the játrové knedlíčky. You buy chicken liver in these little containers. You know, it took me a while to find them. You know, this one came from Safeway. Usually I go and ask because not that very many people buy liver here. So I usually go to the butcher guy and ask him, where is your chicken livers? And they will point you to these little cups. It's about a pound of livers. I use half of it. The half of it will make about 20 to 25 dumplings, 25 knedlíčeks, which is fine for one lunch. But you can double the recipe and use the whole cup, that's fine. So the livers look like this. So I will get them out on my cutting board. And you can see that there is this like a fatty and sinewy stuff in it. So you want to get rid of that. So you take your knife, you hold the stringy part and you kind of slice the knife away from it. So that looks pretty good. And I put it in a blender. This one doesn't have anything, so that can go straight in the blender. Again, this one has some of the fatty part. You know, in Czech, when you buy liver, sometimes there is the bile. I don't know what that organ is called for, which creates the bile, and it's very bitter. And it would be sitting like right there. There's like a little sac. So you would want to work very carefully, or if you have livers from your own animals, then you would have to work very closely not to cut it because that would spoil the whole chunk of meat. But here, you know, when you buy it in the supermarket, it already is removed, so you don't have to worry about it here. So you slice that off. And while I'm doing this, I'm gonna go over the rest of my ingredients. You will need some breadcrumbs, and for half a pound of liver, I use about 1 cup of breadcrumbs. You can use plain breadcrumbs. You can use with the Italian seasoning. It's totally to, you know, whatever your preference is, but you know, they need to be nice and dry breadcrumbs. Then you will need 1 egg for half a pound. And we're done with the livers. Then you need an onion and some garlic. And for spices, you would use some ground pepper, salt. You can use chopped parsley if you like, but it's not necessary. And then you need some broth, which we are going to use in a little bit. So now I have, I'm going to rinse my hands. So we have the half a pound of livers in the blender. We're going to break 1 egg on top of it. And we are going to send it and liquefy it, mix it all together. You can do this in a meat grinder, but I find that the blender is much quicker. Now I'm gonna make some noise so we can, I think, go to Simona to check on her strudel, how it's looking. And
Thank
then
you so much, Milenka, for the platform. I'm going to check how doing our strudel. It's about 10 minutes. And this is progress. This is nice, smelly strudel. And if you can see, there is a little juice from the apple on the bottom. The meat is not broke, but the juice show up. If the strudel is turned upside down, he make it open. This is the trick my grandma teach me, put the strudel upside down, because if you can see like this, there is little juice from the apple. Even though it was a little dry, I don't need to, still some juice is going out, and it's going back for another 10 minutes. And I will put Deniska back.
We're actually back to Milena at this point. And Milena, there's a quick question about the liver dumplings. Can you freeze the liver dumplings if you're only using half of them for the soup?
yes, you can totally freeze it. I would boil them, and then when they're done with a little bit of the broth, I would stick them in the freezer and then unfreeze it whenever you need to. Yeah, you can freeze them. Okay, so now we have the liver blended, and it kind of looks like that. It's not very pretty looking, but it's okay. So we're gonna put it in a bowl. Meanwhile, while Simona was showing her strudel, I cut up the onions. I use a mandolin to chop my onions because I find it's very uniform and it's quick, but you can of course make it with just chop it up with regular knife. So I'm gonna add the onions to the liver and egg mixture. We're gonna put the 1 cup of the breadcrumbs in. This is my allspice, my pepper, and my salt. So we're gonna put that in there, and of course garlic. You need to have garlic in your liver dumplings for the flavor. So you squeeze it through the garlic squeezer and pour about half of the broth in. You don't want to pour everything over at this point because you need to watch the consistency. It's similar as Denisa was talking about the knedlík. The consistency of this is very critical because you don't want it too loose, because then you couldn't form the dumplings, but you don't want it too stiff either, because then, you know, it would be easy to work with, but they would be tough when you cook them. So you want it, this is a little thicker than a pancake batter. I won't pour any more broth in there right now. And I'm gonna let it sit for about 10 minutes, and the breadcrumbs will soak up the moisture from the liver, from the egg, and from the broth. So you can notice now how the texture is now. And when we get back to it, you will see how it changes. It will stiffen up. So I think this should be pretty good for now. So I can go now over to Denisa and we can continue on the dumplings.
Thank you. Thank you, Milena. So our dumplings are boiling and I've just checked on them, and I think I'm going to turn them around. I think it's been about 6-7 minutes. So I want to be sure that they are not overcooked on one side. So that's done. And I wanted to show you what the meat looks like when it's done. I had one batch that I started earlier today, and that's the one that's already finished. So you see it's a different container, and I just need I wanted to show you what it looks like when you pull it out. So this is what you're gonna get when you pull it out of the oven. It smells beautifully. And we have some sauce, we have vegetables. And if you see those black dots, those are allspice that I've been pulling out for the last 5 minutes, and I'm not done yet. But I have prepared one batch. You're gonna be blending it. My grandmother used to use the method of pushing the vegetables through a strainer. To me, that seems like it's too labor intensive. And also I'd like to use all of the vegetables. I don't want to lose any in the process. So what I like to do is blend it. When I blend it, I make sure that there's enough broth in it from the pot. I add milk for it to be a little creamier. At this point, I would also add a little bit of mustard. As I was looking at the recipe, some recipes use vinegar. I've never done it, but I use a little bit of mustard and salt and pepper. Actually, just salt. And we're gonna finish the taste when we're done. But for now, just a little bit of salt, milk, and we're gonna add the cream and the sour cream at the end. So I'm gonna put myself on mute and I will blend it so that I don't blast everybody's ears. And I'm gonna start blending.
And that's right about the Trader Joe's garlic cubes in the freezer section. It's great advice. We always have good advice coming through during these shows too. Little shortcuts you can take or alternatives you can use, because it is so hard sometimes. These recipes are fixed on ingredients that that are easier to find in the Czech Republic, or you can't find something that's quite the same in the US. So any other tricks you're willing to and tips you're willing to share in the chat are always well appreciated.
So I'm going to show you this is the consistency of svíčková that I have right now. As you can tell, the vegetables blended beautifully and they gave it a nice thick consistency. What you will do with the meat, you pull it out. And we're going to slice it. I haven't had much luck with the meat where it just won't fall apart. Gonna see if this one works. But as you can tell, the meat is very, very tender. I like to cut thin slices. Now, if you had, which we didn't do, put the bacon inside or the slices to make it a little more flavorful, the larded braided beef, then you would, as you cutting through it, you would have them coming through it. It would be nicely marbled, but we didn't do that. So what I would do next is I would reheat this. Then I would add the cream. And then I would add about 2 tablespoons of sour cream at the very end. And when you're done, I would probably just cook it, boil it for about 1 minute with all the ingredients in it, taste it, probably salt it a little more, and then add the meat as last. So you want to be done with the sauce before you add the sliced meat, and that's when your dinner is ready. So I'm going to continue pulling out my allspice and blending and continue with my sauce. Back to you, Linda.
Thank you so much, Denisa. And shame on you, you're making us all hungry. So thanks a lot. I don't know why we do this around lunchtime. All right, we are going to check in with Simona to see if the strudel is ready to come out of the oven.
I'm going to check on the strudel and let's go see what the color is it now. You can see after like 15, 17 minutes, it's nice yellowish. It's still in one piece and we'll need about maybe more 5 minutes to get it a bit more color, but we'll be done.
Excellent. We will check back in with you then. And meanwhile, Milena, let's head back to you.
Okay, you can see now, I hope you can see the difference that when it soaked up all the liquid. So when I stick the spatula in there, it kind of holds its shape. Can you see it? Can I
Can you see the difference between before and after? Before it kind of filled back in. Now the breadcrumbs soaked up the liquid. So I think we can start working with this. So I will take my cutting board. Like I had more broth prepared and more breadcrumbs, just in case it would need to be a little thicker or thinner. I don't think I need to use any of it, so I'm just gonna leave it alone. And now the trick is to have some water handy, because you want your palms wet so it wouldn't stick. And you just grab a little piece and you will shape a dumpling about that. So it's about an inch. And you would set it on your prepared cutting board. And you just keep doing this until you use all your knedlíčky mass. And after I'm done doing this, I'm gonna strain the broth and heat up just the liquid part. You can discard the vegetables, and like I will pull the meat off the bones and give it to the dog. But if you are, say you would be boiling a whole chicken, then you can use the meat and put it also into the soup, so there would be more protein in there. Or you can, usually when I boil a whole chicken or whole thighs with the meat, I would save the meat and then make chicken salad. Or you can just, or just slice it on top of your green salad. So there's a lot of different uses for that chicken. So now I'm gonna be making my knedlíčky. And just, you don't have to be, you want them similar size, but you don't have to pre-weigh them so they would be all the same. But you kind of, you want to have them similar size. But again, it's not a science, it's soup. So we can go back to Denisa, I think, while I'm doing this.
We can do, Simona, can we check in with you? Is the strudel done?
Yes, please. I think the strudel is done. The last 5 minutes is very important to check often, because the apple working inside the dough. Okay. Smells great, beautiful, nice color, light brownish. I smell cinnamon, vanilla, sugar, absolutely fabulous. Now, under the strudel is little apple liquid. This is the reason why I need to transform the strudel on a different, slowly, this paper, hot paper, on a different way, and let it cool before I put any sugar and anything on it, which will take about, for sure, like 5 minutes. I have opened a window and door to the balcony to making sure that it's nice, cooler temperature in the kitchen, because if it's warm, the strudel cooling slowly. If we can do little drop, the strudel nicely cooling down.
Perfect, Simona, and we can come back to you to see when you can put the finished product together with the powdered sugar. Quick question for you though, Simona, what was the trick that you used? Is it to bake the strudel with the seam side down? Is that right?
Yes, please. It's very important. My grandma, she always told me, even if I'm doing the regular dough, which rising, or if I'm doing this puffy dough, if I put the sides where I'm trying to seal the strudel down, it's not opening. Sometimes it happens where the apple is very soft and there are lots of fillings, lots of nuts and lots of sugar and other ingredients. People try to challenge themselves and make really the filling very dense. What happened after the 15 minutes, the dough actually open and can split. And unfortunately, sometimes people are not happy because they are like assuming that the dough will keep everything inside. And this is which discourages the people do not do the strudel, because sometimes they put more than 4 or 5 apples and the strudel become very dense. and the dough is actually very, very thin and cannot hold all the filling. Even though if it's thrown upside down, after the 15 minutes, 20 minutes, if the temperature is higher, it needs to be often checked on a strudel. If it's 350, after the 15 minutes, between the 15, 20, 25, we're just looking what color we want to have. The strudel not open. But if it's longer, like 20 minutes, 25, there is high risk that the strudel got burned or burst.
Thank you very much, Simona. Denisa's waving at me, and I think that means she's ready.
Yes, I'm ready to pull out my dumplings, and I was going to show our audience what a wonderful tool I have, and I think I got it in Nový Bečov as well. And this is a handle, and this is sort of a spoon to lift the dumplings from the boiling pot, which I'm ready to do right now. So I'm going to pull it out. And usually when I pull it out, I make with a fork holes in it, so as much of the steam comes out and the dumpling doesn't shrink. And then, of course, we want to cut it not with a knife, but we want to cut it with a string. And you just want to cut at one side and then just keep going. They turned out really nice. They are nice and round. You want to cut them about the same size or same thickness.
This is why my mother used to keep dental floss in the kitchen, unflavored or unscented, right?
I was going to say, does the mint interfere?
Exactly.
And yeah, we're ready to serve. Now, what I usually do is I make several batches. As you can imagine, with 3 boys, when they were growing up, they were hungry. And so I had to make several of these. And they do keep warm, and they are easily microwavable if you have to have one batch. As I said, it's about 7 minutes on each side, so half an hour before the next batch is ready. I'm ready.
Wonderful. Milena's ready too. Go ahead, Milena. Oh, sorry. For those of you looking at Denisa's cut up dumplings, they look beautiful.
They came out nicely. Thank you.
Okay, so I have all the dumplings rolled up, all the knedlíčky. So there's 20, all the, from half a pound, we got 20 right here. So I have a pot ready with a strainer. I'll put that on top. And we're gonna strain the broth. And so now we have just clear broth. The broth I have on the counter ready, getting ready for the mass for the knedlíčky. I just dumped it in there. You can totally use it. So I'm gonna bring this to boil. And Tazzy, if I can ask you. And we're gonna carrots sliced up, some celery, and then for garnish, I will have some green parsley. And again, I like my mandolin because then all the pieces are uniform and the same size. So we're gonna put the vegetables in there. And some people use a lot of carrots. I don't like to use I like carrot, but not too much in the broth because then carrot is slightly sweet. So then the broth would be a little sweet. That's why I don't put carrots in my stock. And I just put a little bit so it would look pretty. And once it starts bubbling, we're gonna drop the dumplings in. And the same as Denisa said, you want to make sure they don't stick to the bottom. So you will have your wooden spoon ready to, once all of them are in there, to stir the pot so they wouldn't stick to the bottom. And so now we're just waiting for it to come back to boil. And this will be enough for a family of 4 for a nice lunch soup, which you would be eating before your main course. If you would be serving it as a main course, then I would say 3 people. That would be enough for 3 people. And it's coming to boil. So we can slowly start dropping the dumplings in. And it's always the hottest on the side of the pot. So that's why I'm landing them in the boiling water on the side. Just make sure you don't burn your hand when you're doing that. And
Dylan, can you comment on shaping the liver dumplings when you were doing that? What about using a spoon?
yeah, you can actually, there is several different methods. You can use spoon if you don't want to touch it. I find that I have the most control. Yeah, but you know, you would want to, like, I guess one spoon would scoop it up and second spoon would push it out of the first spoon. So you would have somewhat of a round dumpling. And I will show you, I'm just gonna stir these very gently. Okay, you can see now they're looking like dumplings. They look good. Awesome. I have one more tool I will show you for an option. You know, this is actually a spätzle or halušky tool for those in Slovakia. You know, they're very familiar with it. You can put the mass in there and it has hole and you would be just going back and forth, and it would make these little tiny dumplings, baby dumplings. And that you know, that kind of saves you a lot of work shaping the dumplings. Did it answer the question?
I think so. I hope so. Let us know if not. There was one other question about the dumplings. How do you feel about after you make them, you put them directly into the soup versus pre-making them and then putting them all in at once? Sort of, does it matter?
Yes, because if you don't put them all in at once, then the first ones would be, you know, maybe 4 minutes in there longer. So you would have some which would start overcooking. So you kind of want to put all of them there at the same time so they would be finished cooking at the same time.
Makes sense. Great.
All right, and now we're just gonna cook it for 5 minutes and then we're gonna be ready to serve.
Perfect. And with that, we will go to Simona to see the final product.
Yes, please. But what I have done now, I have my strudel on a cool soup way and I have added sugar. The trick is if my grandma using this kind of small things for the sugar was not working. She has arthritis, she used the proper tools. She did little sugar and she sprayed everything. As much sugar, she loved it, making like snow. And then after the sugar is nice and cold, usually it's transferred in some kind of beautiful plate, silver plate, looks like that. If you can see that, this is the strudel. Done. Smell fabulous. Apple, nice apple on the side. Got apple. I'm go close to the camera like this, then you see the smelling strudel. And this is the apple star for decoration. And of course, some warm fruit tea with apple, cinnamon, or any kind. Like, and then I will need to try to tell you how it's tasting. It's still a little warm, but I will try a little piece. And I love little whipped cream just for the decoration. Sometimes ladies put a little bit chocolate, and I can share. It smells so good. The vanilla, the cinnamon, and let me try. All of you welcome. It's very tasty, and of course, necessary. I'm happy. Thank you for watching me, and I will share.
Wonderful. So that's the dessert. We're going backwards, but that's okay. Dessert is done. We are back to Denisa, I believe, if you are ready for us.
Yes, I'm ready. I'm just, as you could tell, I continued my journey to pull out all of these beautiful seasonings. So I pulled out the bay leaf and the allspice, the thyme is perfectly fine. And I've been blending in different batches, adding cream, adding a little bit of sour cream, adding a little bit of the mustard and salt. And this is what my sauce looks like right now. And it's beautiful and rich and it smells wonderful. When you serve it, I'm not done yet, but when you serve it, you usually serve it with a dumpling and the meat and the sauce over it. I'm not done with the sauce, so I am hesitant to put it over it, but this is how much what it looks like in a restaurant. You could also add a little bit of cream, dollop of cream, and we usually serve it with cranberry sauce, a little bit of cranberry sauce. I don't do that at home, but in a restaurant, that's what you would get. How much mustard? I remember somebody asked how much mustard. Just a dash, and probably if you did vinegar would have the same little bit of acid taste to it. It just brings the flavors out a little bit out. So I would test it. I would test it to your own taste.
And then generally, can you use yogurt instead of sour cream?
I wouldn't.
Fair enough.
I would use, and you can use as much cream as you want. You can also mix the cream with a little bit of flour if you feel it's not thick enough. We put so much vegetables, and my experience is with so much vegetables that we put in, you don't need to thicken it with flour. So you really have a nice vegetable creamy sauce with as much as you'd like.
Fantastic, Dennis. So thank you so much. I can't believe you were able to do all of that in 45 minutes. Milena, that leaves you.
All right, I think they're ready. We can fish one knedlíček out. Just to make sure, I'm gonna go over there. So this is one knedlíček taken out of the soup. We can cut it in half and it holds shape nicely and it's all brown throughout, so we know it's cooked. So we can pour the soup. So you would usually do 3 dumplings or 4 dumplings, depends how much do you want to eat. And then sparkle some parsley on top. Some people put noodles in there or the meat. It just really depends what you like. You know, when I'm serving knedlíčky, I just do the knedlíčky, and so this is how it would look. And some people know the tradition that at a Czech wedding, the just married couple will get 1 plate with the polévka s játrovými knedlíčky, and they have to feed each other. So they only get 1 knedlíček and they have to split it and feed each other. So we did it at our wedding. My husband was not that thrilled with the liver, but it's a personal preference. So bon appetit. If there are any questions, you know, I'll be happy to answer, and I'm sure Denisa and Simona are ready as well.
Yeah, me too. And I just want to say how fun it is to connect with people far and close. But it's sort of nice to connect with everyone. Absolutely. And I'm hoping that my cousin from Nový Bydžov is watching, because I would want to hear whether I missed anything or not.
Denisa, I saw you making the sauce just now when you were muted. Have you finished it, or no? It's okay.
Not yet. I have to. Yeah, pretty much it's done. Do you want me to pour it over the dumplings?
Sure. Yeah, I'm not going to say no to that.
Okay.
And we're also going to send photos of the finished products when we send the recording to everybody, so you'll see what it should look like.
Okay.
And it's funny, there's in the chat the thank you to the hubbies and behind the scenes, and it's so true, to the camera people, to everybody else. Oh, and the Sokol aprons. I don't know if all of you can see, but our cooks are wearing Sokol aprons.
Yes, we love that. Thank you, Milena.
We try with each of these shows, we try to, you know, bring it up a level. So the aprons were the addition this time. Are they available? Yeah, go ahead.
Everybody, thank you for your patience. None of us are professional cooks, but we love cooking, and we love
that you guys are interested in traditional Czech foods and that you forgive us all our technical blunders, and we love you all. Thank you for coming.
And thank you, Linda, for being such a wonderful moderator. You're a professional, and we are grateful to you.
Hardly, but thank you. To all of our engaged viewers, thank you so much for being with us this Sunday morning. Like I mentioned, we're going to be sending the recipes, a video recording, a chat recap, photos to all of you in the coming days. Once you try these recipes yourself, we invite you to email us photos of your finished products. We'd love to see them. If you like what you saw today, please subscribe to our mailing list at the bottom of the Sokol San Francisco homepage. You'll learn about events just like this one and so many others. I have to make a plug for some upcoming events. One is a pre-concert reception featuring Lukáš Janata at the San Francisco Symphony, where they'll be playing Dvořák and Dvoříšek. That's a week from today. We've got an ecological cleanup on March 5th. And our big event, our big evening event, is on March 18th. It's our večírek, our evening out. Dinner, dancing, a fabulous band called the Groove Doctors, excuse me. They're wonderful. I've seen them. I highly recommend them. I wanted to also give a shout out. I saw at least one person following along, and I know her, and she's fantastic. I hope whatever you were making today turned out well. Kudos for trying to multitask. Did I miss anything? Jana, did I miss anything?
No, not at all. Thank you so much. We are trying to add more sort of the archival documentation onto our website to the archive of that event. So there'll be some pictures. We will be producing this video, and we'll be adding it to our YouTube channel, Sokol SF Media. We have videos there of our previous classes. And I also want to say there was a whole family cooking. They're still cooking. If you are on, there's Martina. So we'd love to hear how that went. And I'm actually going to stop the recording now so that we can have a little bit of a conversation if there is time. But thank you for joining us.
And Katya, I want to recognize what you sent along too. That's why I love these shows. It does bring up a lot of family history, memories, and they can be wonderful, and they can sometimes reignite us stepping back and doing traditional things that we used to do together for our common heritage, and it's so special. All right. Oh, thank you everyone for the kind words. Well done to the chefs. Good job.